Ooh, this video is gonna be a doozy. We're gonna unveil the secrets of Kabbalah, from its early beginnings and its transformation through time as it passed multiple traditions, each of them keeping alive and making available the divine knowledge of the tree of life and its application. If you maintain your attention throughout the entirety of this video, you will receive a spiritual current to give you wisdom, peace, and development, especially if you stick until the end of the video, where I'll teach you the meaning of each Sephiroth, so that you too may install the Tree of Life in your astral body and begin receiving its blessings, in a way that, if you allow it, this video can be an initiation for you. The very nature and structure of Kabbalah divinizes us. As we learn it, we already begin this process. Later, when we already know its structure and it has been properly installed in our subconscious, it begins to act on us, transforming us to be closer and closer to our best possible version, closer and closer to the divine and all its unifying bliss. This is what I intend to share with you today. The Kabbalah is first revealed to the Jewish esoteric circles. Previously, the Jewish esoteric literature was regarding the Merkavah and Hekalot, a series of spiritual practices aimed at building the chariot that carries us to divine planes of being. As the tradition develops, it begins to transform into what would later be the focus of Jewish mysticism, the Kabbalah we know and love. It's believed that the Kabbalistic teachings were revealed by the Archangel Raziel, the very same that I ask to bless me, this video, and everyone who watches it. Kabbalah will help you develop all aspects of yourself. You can even understand how far you've gone as a magician. The Golden Dawn and the Young Fortune share spiritual experiences of each of the Sephirah, so you can use this and measure your own spiritual development and always aim higher, bringing balance to the aspects of you that might still not have it, and already knowing its opposing aspects. The spheres at the right pillar are always balanced by the ones in the left, and vice versa. Out of their harmony, the ones in the middle pillar emanate, which already tells us a bit of how the universe manifests through its opposites. So, to grow magically, spiritually, and materially, I could say in a Kabbalistic language, you should begin organizing your mundane life, health, work, taking care of your mental health. Having established those structures, you should begin to know your own subconscious mind, meditate, and over time develop astral senses. Once you have those, you'll need to integrate your current experiences with the scientific and rational thinking, which in turn should also harmonize with your feelings about life and the universe. Understand that these two modes of thinking, the rational and the emotional, complement each other and are actually both aspects of one higher thing. With your emotions aligned, you will eventually feel the oneness of all. When you align all of those aspects of yourself, you eventually begin to feel the oneness of everything that exists. Maybe you still feel like an individual amongst a huge vastness. From this point of view, we love all humans and, of course, wish to help all of us evolve. So from this perspective arises a kindness that should be balanced with the severity of doing what needs to be done, doing what's just and correct. Around then, we prepare to cross the abyss into the divine triad where all opposites have to be unified. Above this level of consciousness, the magician begins to gain the understanding of how the universe manifests and operates within space-time. By connecting those understandings, we arrive at wisdom, and ultimately, we can dissolve into the experience of oneness from the perspective of the Absolute, no longer from the perspective of an individual. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, a comment, and share with people who can benefit from it as well. If you want to support me further, check our Patreon, whose link is in the description. You'll be a part of our egregore of monthly rituals, and we can chat about whatever you wish. I hope to help you along your spiritual journey as you may help me in my financial life for $8.88 a month. You will also gain access to the rituals that I use nowadays and that I have made public for patrons. But we are here to learn about Kabbalah. So let's begin with its roots. In a Jewish context, Kabbalah, written with a K, can be divided in two main areas: theoretical/speculative Kabbalah and practical Kabbalah. Most of the literature is theoretical, but those teachings are much more closely guarded by the Jewish rabbis. But we can still get some access to it in the Zohar, the Sefer HaBahir, and the Sefer Yetzirah, all of which important and traditional sources. The Sefer Yetzirah, for example, concerns itself with the power of the Otiot, the Hebrew glyphs, its alphabet, who's believed to be a divine language used to create the entire cosmos. Each of its letters composes at least three meanings: the letter itself, a number, and at least one metaphorical symbolism. This already provides a set of associations that are needed to work magic. And learning those associations is also crucial for stretching our minds, so that our minds can understand these complex and interconnected ideas. By stretching our minds to fit and comprehend these structures, we teach ourselves intuitively a method of communication between conscious and subconscious, which is another important thing in our magical journey. It's important to understand that Kabbalah is very much a structure of emanation of the divine from its absolute aspect until the material universe we live in. So it provides one with a roadmap for how that happens. Theoretical Kabbalah gives us a symbolic theology, and its practical aspect is about employing that symbolism towards your divinization, towards becoming more like God and manifesting godly aspects in your life. Practical Kabbalah implies that you have studied and is familiarized with the theoretical or speculative Kabbalah. So it's about embodying the spiritual virtues alluded to in the prior theory. As we can see in the Book of Sacred Names by Jacobus Swart, practical Kabbalah consists of a series of permutations and mathematical operations between the sacred letters, especially of the divine names, to achieve magical results through a sequence of actions and recitations. Jewish magic can seem a little like folk magic, using prayers, incantations, fumigations, ciphers, but a great deal of it are also more like Eastern meditations and prayer sequences to manifest divine powers. Stick around for the video because I will soon share some of the more traditional practices. I'll play a short sample of a Jewish performance of the Ana Bekoach prayer. Pay attention to how similar it is to the style of chanting that we see on Eastern mantras. Now, to give you a few of the tools used within Kabbalah so you can understand what's gonna come later. Gematria is probably the most widely used form of traditional Jewish mysticism. It's the art of calculating the sum of the numbers of a word, since each letter is also a number, and equating the words that have the same sum. So if a certain word has a value of x, which is equal to this another word, there must be a hidden connection between these concepts. They're mathematically equal and are manifestation of the same divine attribute. And we can complicate things further by calculating the gematria of a word in different ways. We can use, for example, just the letters that compose the word, or we can use the full spelling of each of the letters. All of it focusing on establishing these hidden connections and finding meaning in sacred texts and concepts. This allows one to decode any Kabbalistic text and was often employed to the traditional literature, like the Torah, to find hidden meaning. That's necessary because, just as many other spiritual traditions, esoteric knowledge tends to be encrypted for it not to get in the hands of the unprepared. That's why it's emphasized in the Jewish tradition the importance of the verbal teachings by having a teacher. There are also other forms of permutation. Some letters are equated and can be changed in the writing of a text. There are ciphers for exchanging letters within a phrase. Another very famous permutation method is temurah, where the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet is swapped with the last. So Aleph becomes Tav, the second letter, Bet, becomes the second to last, and so on. And lastly, we have notoricon, which is when we use one letter from each word of a sacred Hebrew scripture to form a new divine word. For example, using the phrase Ate Gibor Leolam Adonai, meaning Thou art forever mighty Adonai, and gathering the first letter of each of the words, we form the divine name Agelah. The same logic will also be seen in the 42-letter name of God, which is encrypted in the Anabekoak prayer. The gist is that there are multiple ways to permute the Hebrew alphabet, where each letter represents a divine aspect or power, to arrive at hidden knowledge or encrypted and magically powerful divine names, to be used in meditation, prayer, vocalization sequences, and whatever other ritual practices of self-development aimed at getting close to the divine. In traditional Jewish mysticism, it is also common to combine divine names to attract more particular aspects. Often we can see a divine name being combined with others. For example, we could take the 3-letter divisions of the 42-letter name of God. Each one of those is a divine name on itself, and we can permute those with Yod He Vav He or with Ehyeh, placing the 3-letter name in between the letters of both of these 4-letter names, which creates a longer divine name, often one that is unrecognizable and that can be seen as gibberish by people unaccustomed to the Kabbalistic permutations. And just to throw a little speculation on my part out there, since the Greek magical papyri has many barbarous names of God and also draws from Hebrew names and magical practices, I wonder how many of the barbarous words that can't be translated could actually be combinations of different divine names through methods equal or similar to the ones we see in the Kabbalistic tradition. But going on, in the traditional Kabbalah, we don't have a clear structure for the Sephiroth and the Tree of Life. And we even have different sects proposing different organizations and all sorts of arguments, even in between the Jewish people. To give you more direct examples of traditional Kabbalistic magical practices as I had promised, let's learn a bit from Jacobus Swart. Here we have the construction of a kameot, an amulet, where one has to write on a piece of parchment or clean white paper the combination of El and Chai meaning life, followed by the name of the angel Paniel, which should be written 7 times, and concluding with the combination Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, as well as some magical symbols that are not properly explained, but I have seen similar stuff in Agrippa, for example. This amulet is worn around the neck and protects against afflictions from what they call night demons. That's an example of something that it's very much like folk magic. Another example I found to create a kameot is writing the Anabekoak prayer, which I already mentioned, being linked to the 42-letter name of God, and by writing it in this form, you already create an amulet, more specifically a shivit, a plaque. Lastly, to conclude this first part of the video focused on the Jewish Kabbalistic movement, within the 216-letter name of God, which gets divided into 72 smaller names, which later will give origin to the 72 angels of the Shem HaForash, are originally just a name of God, and they even have their own angelic princess. The 11th name, Lav, can be permuted with Ehyeh to create a new word, Elah Yevhe, By uttering this combination together with another divine name, which is Atzatzfiron, and the name of the angel, Hani El, and repeating those 3 times and putting a prayer after each repetition, it's said to protect against fever. Of course, the ceremonial magician can learn from these more folk magic practices to understand the aspects of the angels and work with them in whatever manner they prefer. In the Jewish circles, much of the esoteric secrets are closely guarded, so it's in the next phase of Kabbalah that some of its secrets begin to be revealed. Academically, this can be called Christian Kabbalah, now usually written with a C to further differentiate the phase of the movement. This will include the works of Christian converted rabbis and mystics who published about Kabbalah for a Christian audience, and even some Christians who, seeing the profound spiritual power that Kabbalah carries, wished to share it with his Christian brothers. Although this goes through some transformation and the Jewish people would reject this part of the tradition, I invite you to see it as a development of it and the spreading of its teachings, which are universal and in my view shouldn't be under the control of a single religion. And, well, if nothing happens against the will of God, I guess God thought the same. One not very traditional author is Isaac Luria, another of my recommendations for your further studies. His drawing of the tree of life is a little different than what we are accustomed to from the more modern traditions, and he himself played with multiple permutations of it, often expanding it and creating crazy connections. He shares some deeply beautiful insight in regards to theoretical Kabbalah, with concepts such as the Tzimtzum, which is a process of contraction that the divine absolute, Ein Sof, the infinite, the unbound, goes through, where it contracts within itself a point to begin the process of creation. In other words, the process through which the Ein Sof contracts its infinite light to create a space where manifestation can happen. It's curious how similar this gets to a Kashmir Shaivite language of Shiva, the Absolute, contracting its wholeness to experience as an individual. I'm doing this comparison with Tantra, but it's also true that the implications of Tzimtzum, although nearing the panentheism similar to Kashmir Shaivism, also maintain a certain separation of the divine and the world of multiplicity, since this contraction of the Absolute can be seen as creating a space within it where it is not. Therefore, anything appearing there would not be the divine. Either way, in a Hindu context, everything that logically arises from profound spiritual inquiry, the masters of India have thought about and qualified over long and arduous debate. Depending on the period, losing a debate meant you had to take the one who defeated you publicly as your guru. This theme of oneness, but still maintaining a clear difference between the absolute and the manifest world of multiplicity, would fit maybe more in a Advaita Vedanta non-dualism, or even a Vishishtadvaita qualified dualism. In Advaita Vedanta, the divine infinite, free of limitation, free of form, free of beginning, occults itself in the illusion of Maya to play, sort of like a hide-and-seek with itself, forgetting its wholeness, to play as an individual trying to remember what it truly is. In Vishishtadvaita, the same absolute is not an impersonal concept, but an all-encompassing being from which all existence is sustained, usually associated with Vishnu. Advaita Vedanta traditions often emphasize Maya as a great illusion, therefore too categorically different to the absolute. Vishishtadvaita can get attached to a particular form of the divine, as I said, usually Vishnu or Krishna, its incarnation. So they can become dogmatic, believing in one absolute being with form of above all others. That can sometimes lead to some prejudice. Both Advaita and Vishishtadvaita agree that a word is impure and one needs to abstain from it to gain enlightenment. Kashmir Shaivism, on the other hand, is much more world-embracing, viewing it as the power of the Absolute to willingly constrain itself to experience as many and share the bliss of its awareness, maintaining its impersonal absolute attribute, but also maintaining that absolute being who is formless, but through its power manifests as the infinite forms we see, and all of them are expressions of it, therefore can carry you to the divine power, and all are equally valid, all gods equally powerful. It's also a path where renunciation comes as a consequence of divine bliss filling your life, and you're naturally ceasing to desire worldly things. Once again, a world-affirming philosophy where you're supposed to work towards achieving your mundane goals, while not becoming attached to them. Much more akin to a modern Kabbalistic approach of the Hermetic magician we will later discuss. I just wanted to give this brief talk about the Indian context and Kashmir Shaivism, first because I love talking about Kashmir Shaivism, and you really should research it further, but also because this helps elucidate the philosophical questions being pondered by the Kabbalists over time. And to be fair, we were talking about the Tzimtzum, and there's also a, let's say, non-literal reading of it, where the space being created exists only from the perspective of the individual below the abyss. From a divine perspective above the abyss, there never really is an absence. God is always fully there, even in the void. Once again, connecting us to the panentheist view that we can see in Kashmir Shaivism. Going on with Lurian thought, he will talk of the Shevirat HaKelim, the breaking of the vessels, where in a first process of emanations the Sephiroth were unable to handle the divine power and shattered, giving rise to the Clifoth, the shells, the origin of evil and the dark side of Kabbalah. It is because of this Shevirat HaKelim that we have to engage in tikkun, repairing or correcting. Most specifically, tikkun olam, where through repairing the world, we begin to restore it to its divine appointed state. Other big names of this Christian area of Kabbalah, all of which should be studied, include Pico della Mirandola, Johann Reuchlin, who is the guy who added the Shin to the Tetragrammaton, creating the Yod-He Shin Vav-He in his Verbo Mirifico, where he shares these most exalted divine names that will later be used by Eliphas Levi, another important name of the magical tradition, but Levi comes later in history. I should also cite that is around this area that Reuchlin grabbed the name of 72 names of the Jewish tradition and made angels out of them, adding the suffixes El or Ia, which give rise to the nowadays very famous Shen HaForash. If you want, I can one day make a video specifically about them. Let me know what you think. The last Renaissance and Christian Kabbalist relevant to us here is Athanasius Kircher, who created the design of the trio life we know and love today. Since Christian mystics were very well educated in Greek philosophy, this Christian phase of Kabbalah also begins to mix Kabbalistic thought with many Greek ideas. Kabbalah, since its roots, would have some correlation to Neoplatonist thought, but Aristotelianism begins to be incorporated as well. So Kabbalah begins to have this more all-encompassing philosophical place, making it extremely influential in many of the later magical practices. These philosophers, who were already unifying spiritual Pythagorean, Jewish, Islamic, and Christian philosophies, forming a more encompassing view of the multiple divine teachings of the world, such as a great magician usually does, and they all held the human being in a very special place within the cosmos, stepping present at the material plane with his feet and with his mind amongst the divine angels through the development that Kabbalah brings. So it fits incredibly well that the later school of interpretation to evolve from the previous will be the Hermetic, very influenced by the 19th century Golden Dawn, whom themselves aimed at unifying multiple branches of mystical knowledge with Greek philosophy, Christianism, Egyptian gods, Hermetic philosophy, Kabbalah, astrology, tarot, and a bunch more. Since the main sources for this part of the spiritual development of Kabbalah are what truly makes it accessible to all of us through our own studies and effort, and begins to give us a key to unifying all spiritual traditions, I really recommend you all to begin reading Mystical Kabbalah by Dion Fortune, and only later diving deeper into the Christian, and probably only after that, the Jewish phases of the tradition. Now, To teach this divine knowledge and allow it to begin working with you, all I need to do is explain the structure and the meaning of each Sephiroth, leaving to you the work of meditating on the Tree of Life, both its images and its meanings. And when you've understood its parts, begin reading the more traditional sources to see the path this beautiful tradition passed until reaching you. Drawing it also allows for easier apprehension of its concepts, so it may be a good exercise if you feel so inclined. Realize that this video promised an initiation into Kabbalah, and it indeed provides you with that. But the next phase of your initiation after completing this video with full attention is to keep studying, meditating on the tree and each Sephiroth. Begin taking notes of the feelings and thoughts or visions you experience while meditating on them. That is what will truly awaken you to the Kabbalah. This initiation lies in your hands from now on, and your first step is, of course, to finish this video with focus. I like to think of Kabbalah as the structure, the pattern followed by the divine as it permutes itself into the material world of multiplicity. In that sense, its teachings remain true in different levels of interpretation, all perfectly fitting together. Before the Tree of Life begins, we have the veils of negative existence. We begin with Ain, the no thing, representing the absolute God, simply being. The Ain becomes aware of itself, realizes its infinity and becomes Ein Sof, without limit. This allness, this wholeness further develops to become Ein Sof Or, the infinite light. Of course, we're speaking metaphorically. This state of being is so expanded and far from form, language, or space-time that's impossible to describe. It can only be pointed towards. You may realize that the Kabbalah so far describes both the path of God towards manifestation, but also represents aspects of our own souls, being a map or guide to explore our consciousness. It's also a spiritual path to follow with levels of development through each sphere. So it truly is an all-encompassing teaching that can be applied to all areas of our lives. But I should elucidate one particularly powerful way of using it. Each Sephiroth has a respective archangel, all of which incredibly powerful. After you have the knowledge of the system and has understood all its parts, you begin to be able to work with these magnificent angels. By the way, I haven't yet, but I will soon share my ritual evocation for the archangels of the Sephiroth for all of my Patreons. So come support me there. I deeply appreciate you if you decide to do it, in the same way that I already deeply appreciate all of you who already began supporting me. Thank you very much, sincerely. It's only because of this that I have been able to begin doing weekly videos. So stick until the end and I'll give you both the archangel correlations and also the planetary correlations, plus how to see the Kabbalah as aspects of the divine and therefore fitting other pantheons of deities and expressions of these archetypal divine aspects. This is of course a very modern interpretation, but I truly see it as an expansion of the knowledge within the Kabbalistic tradition. And it's the very associations that allow using Kabbalah as a key to all spiritual traditions, seeing how they all have deities for these exact same archetypal forces, who seem to have been identified and expressed in multiple deities throughout the development of many spiritual and religious traditions. Now, to the meaning of the Sephiroth and the Tree of Life. Through the Tzimtzum explained earlier, the infinite begins to pour over itself to begin creation, giving rise to the first swirls, which is associated with Keter, the first of our 10 Sephiroth. Keter represents oneness. One is all and all is one. From it, all emanates, to it, all returns. This is said to be the highest level of consciousness that a human can perceive, and even so, it's said that it has a forward face, which is Keter, the crown, and a hidden one, facing the infinite, facing the veils of negative existence, indicating that we can't perceive its wholeness. Keter has no unbalanced aspect. It can be associated with the Tao of a Taoist, who manifests as the power of opposites yin and yang, or the following two emanations of the Kabbalah, Chokmah, the divine wisdom arising from the self-awareness of the divine, which is also associated with divine potency, masculine energy, and being the first in the pillar of mercy, the right pillar of Kabbalah. Chokmah in an unbalanced state is madness, where we are doing expanded connections such as wisdom requires, but with wrong bits of understanding, therefore causing paranoia, delusions, and all sorts of psychiatrical issues. Not later, not before. When Chokmah arises, Binah arises too. Binah is the feminine aspect of the divine, associated with knowledge and understanding, also being the actual creatrix of the universe, since it's associated with giving limits to the omnidirectional power of Chokmah. Those limits creates time and form. It truly is the divine feminine who carries the power to create and destroy. Binah, in an unbalanced state, causes avarice, depression, low energy, and absence of motivation to keep long-term efforts. These three comprise our divine triad, all of which equally divine, all of which sharing oneness. After it, we have Da'at, which is not a Sephirah, and here represents the abyss, which is where the divine triad inverts itself and began reflecting downwards. Now, already in the plane of form, crossing the abyss is an important aspect of the magical path where one crosses the void of uncertainty, and if he can unify all the spiritual paradoxes that arise from the great questions of existence, one can emerge divine at the other side. But crossing the abyss is part of the journey to go back to the divine. Since I'm explaining Kabbalah, let's continue our descent after the divine triad. The very first divine emanation, where there can be another, an individual outside of oneness and within time, limited by form, is Hesed, loving kindness, or simply mercy. It represents growth, expansion, love, abundance. When unbalanced, it can bring tyranny and indulgence in material pleasures. This, to me, carries a hidden secret, which is that as soon as we begin to have a possibility of multiplicity, the very first emanation of God is love, which is to say that love is the very first feeling that arises as soon as there is something outside of us to be loved. Of course, outside of us is just a way of saying it. It's, of course, all God. Hesed is balanced by Gevurah, the severity, the might of God. It encompasses all martial and warlike aspects of life. When balanced, it's the will to act in protection of yourself and others, to fight for justice. When unbalanced, it's uncontrolled rage. It's vice when extreme manifests as cruelty and evil for evil's sake. Through the balance of the two previous emanations and receiving the influence from all other spheres on the tree, we now have Tiferet, the center of the tree, representing Christ consciousness, the awareness of oneness, even if still feeling like an individual, like a tiny part of the divine. It's the sphere of empathy, but when unbalanced, causes us to be prideful and arrogant, as if we were better than others. Anytime you see people from New Age spirituality claiming to be starseeds who have special powers and are better than the normal folks, that's an unbalanced Tiferet. Same when we see a very arrogant magician who began to feel that he's better than others because of his power, knowledge, or experiences. Descending further, we have Netzach, victory, representing our emotions, intuitions, and the entire capacity for emotional processing. Its virtue is letting go, and its vice, its unbalance, is excessive lust and emotional manipulation. Netzach, being our emotions, has to be balanced by Hod, representing our logic and rational thinking, processing capacity. It's also associated with study, learning, and magic. As a good academic and scientific pursuit, it seeks truth, so its imbalance is untruthfulness, intentional misinformation, and things of the kind. All these influences and aspects so far concentrate on Yesod, the foundation, associated with our subconscious mind, and being the bottleneck where all spiritual influences flow through before reaching the material plane. So it's also associated with all mystical senses, intuition, and the ability to perceive the subtler aspects of life, since all pass through it. Lastly, it all converges on Malkut, the kingdom, where the absolute oneness of Keter, reflected through the individual consciousness of Tiferet, channeled through Yesod, can experience the material plane, and it's the completion of the divine work. It's crucial in Kabbalah to know that all Sephiroth are divine, all balance each other out, and they all represent aspects of our souls. So by bringing that balance to these parts of ourselves, we grow and access divine knowledge, wisdom, and bliss. Before I give you the last associations between the Sephiroth, archangels, planets, and divine names, I should say that there's one other facet of Kabbalah, which can be seen as a map not only for our souls and aspects of ourselves, but also a map of divine planes of existence that could be traveled through and explored through astral traveling or path-working techniques that can give us insights into each Sephirah. This is a very important practice to do during the next phases of your initiation if you choose to follow it. You can begin a meditation practice visualizing each sphere, maybe even imagining yourself within the sphere, seeing its colors all around you, and taking notes of what you feel, what ideas come up. It is through this process of study and meditation that you will, over time, integrate Kabbalah to your subconscious mind, and you will begin truly benefiting and being able to greatly enjoy the help of the archangels in your magical practice. It should be noted that just as adding the shin to the tetragrammaton is seen as a blasphemy for a traditional Jewish rabbi, the associations with pantheons and integration of Kabbalah and the Goetia system, as we see in the Golden Dawn, would be considered blasphemous for the Christian Kabbalists mentioned earlier. So by seeing these texts, we can sense how this spiritual tradition evolved through time, and in the Hermetic Kabbalah it even gained back some of the aspects that had been lost in the Christian era, where most of the authors would speak of a three-world model, but at the Golden Dawn, we come back to the more traditional four-world model, also taught in traditional Kabbalah. Now, the archangel and planetary and divine name associations. You can employ these divine names in your magic. If you're doing your work that would benefit from the influence of a certain Sephirah, you can vibrate the name associated to it to bless your work. Keter is associated with no planet in traditional astrology, but it can fit very well with Neptune, being of all things transcendent. Its divine name is Ehyeh, meaning I am that I am, and its archangel is Metatron. Chokmah is associated with the entire zodiac, and therefore the level of the fixed stars. Some modern readers associate it with Uranus. Its divine name is Yud-He-Vav-He, and its archangel is Haziel. Binah is associated with Saturn. Its divine name is Yod-He-Vav-He Elohim, or El Elyon, and its archangel is Tzafkiel. Da'at is not a Sephirah, but being the abyss and connecting to the Kliphoth, the infernal realms, it can be easily fitted with Pluto from modern astrology. It doesn't have a divine name, but people usually use the one associated with Binah. Hesed is associated with Jupiter. Its divine name is El, and its archangel is Tzadkiel. Gevurah is associated with Mars. Its divine name is Elohim Gibor, and its archangel is Kamael. In earlier traditions, you can see the archangel as Kumael or Samael. I personally associate Kamael as the archangel of Geburah, but in traditional Kabbalah it would be Samael. But that's a fallen angel and has a very destructive and chaotic energy, fitting more with demons than angels in my personal experience. Tiferet is associated with the sun. Its divine name is Yod-He-Vav-He Eloah Va-Da'at, and the archangel is Raphael. Netzach is associated with Venus, and its divine name is Yod-He-Vav-He Tzabaoth. The archangel is Haniel. Hod is associated with Mercury. Its divine name is Elohim Tzabaoth, and its archangel is Mikael. Yesod is associated with the moon. Its divine name is Shaddai El-Kai, and the archangel is Gabriel. Lastly, Malkut is associated with earth and the four elements. Its divine name is Adonai Haaretz. and the Archangel, its sandal form. I should also mention that since the early Kabbalists there speak of the 4 Kabbalistic worlds, Olam Ha-Atzilut, the world of emanation, or the archetypal world, the ideas within the mind of God, similar to Plato's world of ideas, the Olam Ha-Briah, the world of creation, where these ideas began to be developed and organized towards manifestation, Olam Ha-Yetzirah, the world of formation, where there's already a multiplicity of wills and individuals with their own egos and not necessarily aware of divine oneness. This is a plane where things begin to take form until they develop into the foundation of the material world. And lastly, Olam Ha-Asiyah, the world of action, or the material world we live in. I further see the Klipov, the hellish realms, as a sort of subdivision of Malkut, indicated by the black portion pointing down into the Golden Dawn 4-color scheme for Malkut. It is said that all the 4 worlds are interconnected and interact with each other. It's also said that there's a tree of life for each or the 4 worlds. I intend to speak more of the 4 worlds and their interconnectedness in a future video, specifically about them, and what's called Jacob's Ladder, the extended Kabbalah structure, comprising all of the 4 worlds in one glyph. But this type of video is huge and a lot of work, so I need this video right here to do well. So help me out, otherwise it may take a while until I get to do these bigger videos. So to close this video with a bit of Cordovero, another very important name in the Kabbalah tradition. To him, what Kabbalah is a descriptive structure that serves as the model replicated throughout the great chain of being that begins in the infinite God, that then becomes one, that then manifests as the polar of opposites and further permutes itself to become the all. And through uncovering this great chain of being, we can see how everything is interconnected. And once we know how things connect, we can pull the correct strings to enact magic. I hope this video has ignited your spiritual fire and that Kabbalah incentivizes you to keep studying, meditating, and learning, because over time it does bring multiple blessings to our lives, on top of being the basis of much of the ceremonial magic tradition. So it's crucial for any magician. Don't forget to leave a like, a comment, and support us on Patreon. Much love, bliss, and magical growth to you. I truly hope you go on with the initiation I began for you. Keep at it with a pure heart, and you will see the fruit of your effort. I'm certain of it. Go read the people I mentioned throughout the video that you feel called to. But if you're a beginner, start with Dion's Fortune book. If it still doesn't click, maybe try Israel Regardless Garden of Pomegranates and keep meditating with the tree. You feel that you understood all parts of it. Much love, thank you very much for watching till the end. Bye bye.